So we do flight testing.
Oh, that's
So whenever we have a contract, then you might see us work doing some. Yeah.
Oh, he had to make his own sign, look at that.
I forgot staff. I took care of everybody, and then I said, oh, wait a minute, we have to be here too.
Are you with an organization?
Just do something.
Oh, missing.
I would love that. I've been talking to plus you, John Southgate and a few people. Yes. Me too, and
Shall we get started? I think everybody has said hi to each other that they haven't seen forever, which is wonderful. Boy, we have some good introductions to do. I could actually not look at the computer screen. I'll start.
Oh, I'm Chris Lockenmeyer, and I represent the school district as well as our business, NSC.
Yeah, I'm Kristen Koptic. We have two Kristens together. One is Ian, one is Ian. I am an at-large member from Rockaway.
Hey, I'm Cami Oftemauer, Executive Director of Tillamook County Habitat for Humanity.
Nathan Carpenter, representative for the city of Tillamook.
I'll see. I'm Ed Gallagher, chair of the meeting and a resident of North County.
Erin Starr, Tillamook County Commissioner, liaison to this housing commission.
Michelle Yang, Adams Tillamook Community Wellbeing Director and at-large employer representative on the commission.
I'm Gail Uzell, and I'm South County at-large, and I'm also on the Tillamook County Planning Commission.
Valerie Schuman, a member at large, real estate broker.
Barbara McLaughlin, member at large, North County.
Carrie Fleischer, at-large member, and I also run the Lee County School District.
John Main, happily retired contractor, at-large member.
Okay, our guests, please, I'll start over here.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Tillamook Habitat for Humanity, resident in Countryside.
Trevor Belts, I'm with the Creamery, and I'm also on the legislative subcommittee.
Just off I'm the executive director of the Tillamook Chamber.
Suzanne Weber, I'm the representative for House District 32.
Meg Angier, I'm the housing coordinator for the Nestucca Ridge Family of Companies.
That would be Pelican.
Yes, Pelican.
Right.
And our staff?
Yeah, oh yeah. TJ, you want to?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is TJ Fiorelli. I'm the Tillamook County Housing Coordinator. I've been here for about 6 months, and I'm really excited to meet you all for the first time in person. What an exciting room we have and lots of energy.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Sarah Absher. I'm the Director of Community Development. It is so nice to see everyone in person. We're having a bit of a technical difficulty. I'm so sorry. I think our folks online are having a difficult time hearing. Is that correct? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Okay. Can one of you please do a sound check? Miss, can you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm Miss Carlson Swanson, and I represent a nonprofit organization, Oregon Food Bank.
Yeah.
Hi, Tim Borman, at-large member, Bay City.
Let's see, Nathan.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Torres, City Manager of Tillamook and the guest.
Let's see, I can't read the name.
Daniel? David?
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
Tillamook Coast Engineer Association.
That should work if you want to call on Daniel again.
Daniel? Okay, well, we know it's Daniel, and we'll probably maybe have some conversation as we go along. Okay, introductions. Mission Minute. This is a tradition that, for those who are new to the group, that we've had where we talk about things that have gone well. We don't have a negative mission.
We cannot hear anything at this time if anyone is speaking.
So I think we're gonna have to speak loudly. Can you hear if we project, miss? Nope.
That's a no.
We have mics at our school board meeting.
Yeah, you guys have perfected it, like.
Okay, well, we'll do the best we can. Mission Minute. TJ, you want to talk about your meeting with the city of Manzanita briefly?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm excited to let you all know that we've
We're
been...
muted if you, can we pause for just a second? I think the room is muted.
Because that little thing.
Mike.
Yeah, the mic is muted.
I'll try.
Good to catch.
She unplugged
So
something.
you got it, Terry, maybe before we continue, let's see if that solves our problem or if it's bigger, maybe bigger than that,
But that would be great.
that would be a good start.
Oh, they got it. It works.
Okay.
We just unmuted, I don't know if that's gonna be enough. So, Miss, can you hear us now?
We can hear you, but it's very broken up and it's very difficult to hear.
It's because I'm tied into the phone and the computer.
Okay.
We maybe try to up the volume on the speaker on the phone. I don't know if that would
Is
help.
there a microphone to be available for the speakers?
I was just gonna is there a microphone that we can use?
No, Tim.
And I tried to connect my hotspot. And that didn't work.
Technology won't be working.
That's all I got.
All right, Miss, can you hear us better now?
Miss, can you hear us now? Better?
I would say no.
Yeah.
Are they muted?
That's why I'm back.
Yeah, we're getting feedback between these.
Miss, can you hear us now?
No.
No. Okay, so the other thing that we can do is we could disconnect the phone. I could use my speaker, but I think we all just have to talk very, no, I think you have to yell, but just loudly and clearly.
Is Miss on the phone or is she on Zoom?
She's on Zoom, but I have the phone with the speaker because when we had our hazard mitigation plan meeting, the feed, you could actually hear better through the phone.
Gotcha. So she would have to call in, because you're muted, she would have to call into the phone.
The phone's connected to the meeting too. I dialed into the
gotcha,
meeting on the phone.
Gotcha.
Let's disconnect the phone. We hang up the phone and we'll try my speaker. Thank you, Pammy.
Maybe. This is not the right phone.
Do you have a different one? It's the one that we actually used.
Like, that's a different phone than
worked better.
Okay. Sarah, I have a job around for that.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michelle.
What is that?
It's a remote speaker.
You can use USB and it helps. Yeah.
Can you hear me, miss? Oh, wait. Can you hear me, miss?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Nice, Sarah.
Okay.
Can you hear us from this side of the room?
Who just spoke?
Chris.
Yeah, that was much better.
That sounds great. I saw a yes on the screen.
Okay, well, I'll take Pammy. I think this will work.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
This also works.
Okay.
Okay, let's get going and see if we get back on TJ.
All right, that was actually a quick minor difficulty. Folks, I'm really glad that you can hear us now. Folks in the room, I'm really glad to share that we have been talking with cities up in North County for the past couple of months, developing those relationships that are so important to making the work that we do move forward. Most recently, we presented to the city of Manzanita about the property tax exemption that was passed a few years ago here in Tillamook County. I'm excited to tell you that we got very positive feedback from the full council, and the city council has invited us back to talk about implementation. So we have more to share in the future, and I think there are going to be some exciting developments coming forward out of the city of Manzanita.
That's great.
Nice.
I'd like to.
Sure.
So Cami Oftemauer, Habitat for Humanity, we officially are building in Ebo. It's taken us a little bit of time, but foundation is being poured. Elizabeth's our volunteer coordinator, so she's got some groups coming out. We're gonna start framing soon. Very excited to get this house off the ground. Our next build will be in Garibaldi, so we're working on the kind of permitting process on that right now. We're also in family selection, and we had 41 families apply for our program, which is double that I've ever had. The most I've ever had is 26, so that just shows the need, obviously. We also have a silent auction coming up that's opening on Sunday, so if you guys want to bid and help support housing, definitely love to do that. And then we also have an impact report for anybody that wants to know bigger scope of what's going on with Habitat. Your guys' stories with What's the Story, it's very similar. It has a lot of highlights from our families and their stories in here, so pretty cool.
Forgot to mention, if you could raise your hand like on the computer, it was great. It's a little hand came up.
Yes.
If you could do that here, that's helpful to make sure I could call in. Valerie.
Some of you may have heard, but Paul Daniels' third project in Garibaldi got partial approval, 18 units, one bedroom and studios on the lower portion, and 7 lots up above to be sold off for individual houses for single-family residential.
It's a cautiously optimistic mission moment in that there is funding and a plan for a program at TVCC to educate the healthcare workforce locally. And the benefit of that, of course, is out of the 70 openings that we have at Adventist Health Tillamook right now, 18 are for RNs. This is a program that would educate RNs living right here in Tillamook County already and not have the 113-day wait that we have to get an RN from the beginning of the process to the end because of a variety of reasons, but housing being one of them. So this is a project that I've been working on, and if anybody would like to support it or any more information, let me know.
Michelle, it's a bond measure, isn't it? Be on the ballot?
It will be on the May ballot, thank you. And yes, it is to raise the remaining funds to match the $8 million state match. And there's also another $425,000 in earmarks from the federal government that have been committed to the program itself because of the acknowledgement of the need for expanding, particularly nursing in rural communities, but healthcare workforce expansion in general.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Scar, do you want to announce the 400,000?
Oh, sure, do we want to do that here?
Oh,
Or
well,
this moment in the meeting? I wasn't sure
we'll-
we were going to do that.
We'll talk about it later, but we'll talk in detail
Absolutely.
later.
So commissioners did the ARPA awards, and the Housing Commission has been awarded $400,000 to seed the grant fund that we have here. So super excited about that.
Yay! That's a clapping moment.
That's a good seeding.
From nothing to that.
Right, we asked
Great.
for $1 million, we ended up with 400, so I thought that was a pretty good one. Always shoot high, right?
I think that was discussed at one of our meetings, to shoot high, and we did. That's good, worked out. Anything else that anybody has? Okay, Nathan, George is our guest, and hopefully the communication will work well, Nathan, to talk about sewer issues on the east side and how the city of Tillamook is addressing the issue.
Yes, I can hear you all right.
Good.
Did you want me to speak now?
Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. I appreciate, thank you, TJ, and everyone else who's invited me to be at this meeting. I really appreciate it. TJ and I had met last week and talked about sewer issues, and he asked me to provide an update to the Housing Commission on what's going on with the city and where we're at and where we're going. So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, so I'll try to give a brief overview of what's going on, and I can take questions afterwards. Essentially, everything east of Miller Avenue and east is all on a specific system. Let me back up. Our collection system all goes down to our wastewater treatment plant. Everything on the east side of town is connected into one force main that is on the TPUD property at the corner, roughly the corner of 12th Street and Pacific Avenue. So all of our wastewater from that side of town, the flushing system, all drains to that pump. That's a force main, meaning that it has two pumps there that pushes it all the way to the wastewater treatment plant. The pumps have been replaced about 10 years ago. They're in good shape. They work fine. Everything works fine. The problem is it's only a 12-inch line. And so that 12-inch line has met capacity. In fact, that 12-inch line met capacity in 2005. So anything added on has been a miracle that we haven't had too many problems. Nevertheless, the city has done different things to try to fix it, done some CDBG projects, replaced lines, so forth. However, it's not been fixed. And unfortunately, we are at a very serious problem now. We had our engineers come out and do some calculations on it, and we are meeting or exceeding our flows capacity during wet season for sure. We have a little bit of capacity in dry season. So I don't know if the situation is people just flush at different times or whatnot or turn the water, but we've been really happy that we haven't had any major disasters with our wastewater flowing. So what that entails, in order to fix that, we have to first understand exactly how it needs to be fixed. In my mind, I can say, oh, we just need to put a bigger line in. Well, maybe. Or maybe we just need to put a line in over on the north side along the state highway or this or that. But what that takes is that we need to have a plan, we need to know what to do. And so we have to update our wastewater master plan. And to do that, it's going to take somewhere between $250,000 to $275,000 that we estimate. So we applied for a grant in December with the county, and we appreciate greatly that they have approved a $200,000 this ARPA award for us. So that will be wonderful. That will be very helpful. That will allow us to get the master plan really moving. That master plan will then generate essentially the capital improvement plans, and then we'll be able to understand everything that we need to do. This process, we estimate between 3 to 5 years. We will be working on as quickly as possible. If there's anything we can do, I know I've had a lot of questions about, well, can we just fix I&I problems and lower capacity? Absolutely. We can do that, and that will help. Can we do this? Can we do that? I mean, we're going to look at everything we can possibly do. To give you a little overview on I&I, so I&I stands for inflow and infiltration. And essentially that is groundwater, rainwater, sometimes direct access where people have their downspouts and their roofs actually right into their sewer, which is illegal, but also not everybody always knows. When we have that groundwater go into our system, that goes down to the wastewater treatment plant, and then we're treating rainwater, which doesn't need to be treated, at least it doesn't need to be treated at capacity. So just to give you an overall view, our wastewater treatment plant processes on an average about 500,000 gallons per day of wastewater. Industry standard across the nation is during a rain event, you usually pretty much double that. So we'd be getting about 1 million. During our storm events, we get sometimes over 7 million gallons per day. So you can see we're substantially high, and that is, sorry about that. Chief of Police was calling me. So what that means is that we are getting a substantial amount of rainwater in our system. It should not be that high. The city hired a company before I came to go out and do an I&I study. You may recall last summer they were going around doing smoke testing, and they were also doing camera work. And there's two sides to that. One is all of the wastewater collection system that's on the city side. So all the main lines going through, everything from the point of connection for homes and to the wastewater treatment plants, all owned by the city and taken care of by the city. From the point of connection to the house is the responsibility of the homeowner. So we are mapping out both of those, and eventually we will be sending out letters and notifying residents of the issues with their wastewater lateral lines. One of the things the city has done recently, just this last fall, was enter into an agreement with HomeServe, which is a company, a giant company in the U.S. It's international in many countries. And what they do is they provide home warranty lines for wastewater laterals, and actually water laterals and even indoor plumbing. If any of you listen to the radio morning updates with the county on Tuesdays, I talk about this every Tuesday. We have information on our website, et cetera, et cetera. It's on our social media as well, our Facebook page. What that allows residents to do is to sign up for insurance if you're a homeowner, and you can pay, right now, I looked up yesterday, it was right around, it's just under $7 a month to have a wastewater, just for your wastewater line. And the water line's a little cheaper, and the indoor plumbing's a little bit more, like $8 or something. And what that allows you to do is get up to $8,500 for any work that's done on your sewer or water line if you have both services, and up to $3,000 if you do wall-to-wall indoor plumbing. So that's unlimited. It's this company is huge. They have a 24-hour service. They use local plumbers. You don't even pay for it. You get on insurance. You have a 30-day waiting period. You can opt out anytime. You have a problem, you call them up. They dispatch a plumber. They take care of it. They pay for it. It's done. You can have unlimited number of calls in a year or any time. So we really encourage people to sign up for that. That will be a huge benefit to them to take care of their lateral lines. Otherwise, you could be paying $6,000, $7,000 per repair. So this is a great program. If it sounds too good to be true, it's not, because the way it works is they have a giant, massive company. They have, I can't remember how many cities in Oregon. It's quite a few in Oregon. The League of Oregon Cities has embraced this. It's actually, it's also the National League of Cities supports this. It's on their website. And just the last bit I'll say about that, it is essentially a giant program, and they have all kinds of cities, and a lot of cities don't have the infrastructure problems we have, and so they're able to use the money in areas like us. I mean, we're just a really small drop in the bucket for them, even though for us it's a lot. So that is the basic overview of our wastewater system. I've been talking to council. Unfortunately, we are looking at doing a moratorium to stop building on that side. It is a horrible thing to have to do that, but we cannot have sewer coming out of our streets and up into people's homes. We want to fix this. We are dedicated to fixing this quickly as possible. I have been working very closely with the Tillamook Bay Community College. They reached out to me. They've been concerned. But I will say that it looks like our timelines are about the same. By the time they're even on building and getting on board, we should have our system corrected and fixed, at least enough to move forward. The last piece I want to say about the wastewater master plan, that will not only help us fix the issue, it will help design what needs to do for future growth. I realize housing is huge. Businesses are also really important. Businesses are what grow a community. Without businesses, we would start to dwindle and die off. So everything is important. The wastewater master plan will help identify not only what needs fixed, but where we need to go forward in the future. It gets into sizing, it gets into location, it gets into flows, it gets into gravity fed. Most of our system on that side is gravity fed down to the force main, and then it's lifted up and pumped up to the treatment plant. So that is the really basic overview of what's going on and where we want to go. I want you to know, the city council, the city, we're very committed. We greatly appreciate what the county has done for us in providing that funding. That will be a huge help. And we understand, and I've met with multiple community leaders and talked to them, and I've met with all three commissioners and talked with them. I want you to know we're committed and we want to get this fixed. I think a big part of this is just bringing transparency in the community. Everyone needs to know what's going on. We need to understand where our problems lie, and we need to know that I believe this is a community issue. Not that this communities take care of this, but I mean, we're all in this a community. We're a community of Tillamook, and we're here to help each other and work together. And that is all I have.
Okay, questions for Manager Jordan?
Nathan, I've heard that you're looking to mandate sewer scopes on homes that are sold. Is that something that's true, or what's the story on that?
I appreciate you bringing it up. That is not the case anymore. It was for about a year. In December of 2020, the council approved an ordinance that mandated inspections and certifications on when people are selling their homes. So after a lot of review and discussion, I realized that ordinance had never been reviewed by our legal staff. It was a really poor ordinance. It was a good intent. The intent was to help people fix their lateral lines at a time when they had the most money because it's coming through a transaction. It's a great intent. Council still wants something along those lines. We are working on that, but I did, at the end of last year, approach the council, gave them a whole history, and asked that they repeal it. That was repealed. So that is no longer in effect. There is no certification program. The city still does have the right to ensure that lateral lines are fixed, and that's in our code from the 70s, at least the 1977 code. So we will be working on an ordinance that helps capture inspections point ordinance. The difference is we can't do a compliance program because we don't have licensed plumbers on our staff. And we have licensed plumbers going out and inspecting a sewer lateral line and telling it's okay. It's not appropriate for the city to turn around and say it's not because we don't have licensed plumbers on our staff. So it was a logistical situation. The intent was really good. It got into some serious issues, and I asked the council to repeal it. So that's the basic history.
Well, it's certainly a good idea. I appreciate the clarification.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, please. Could you talk a little about how the wastewater insurance does or does not directly benefit the sewer authority, and also how the wastewater insurance might or might not mitigate the ability to build more dense housing?
Okay, I apologize. It cut out a little bit. Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll try to shout at you. I guess I should shout at the speaker and not you. Could you talk a little about how the insurance, how the wastewater insurance specifically or does or does not benefit the sewer agency, and also how the insurance might mitigate building houses, building units?
I appreciate it. I think if I talk a little bit, but I think what your question you're asking about how this warranty, the sewer insurance or sewer warranty will help mitigate the problems we're having and also help with the residents. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll do my best here to answer. So that's a really good point. There are 2 points to that. Number one is that when you have any type of problem with your sewer lateral line, you're going to have a really good way of paying for it. It's up to $8,500 that they pay per call. So if you have any issues, if you get your sewer lateral stops working, if you get plugged up, if it's some problem, you can call and you'll be able to take care of it. So I mean, this is not a mandatory program by any means, but this warranty provides a payment method by paying. Literally, I went online Tuesday before the radio call, and I did the math, and it was just under $80. I think it was like $79 and something cents for a whole year to have complete coverage at $8,500 per call. The I&I, or the rainwater, is entering our system, is entering multiple places. It's both on the city side and on the residential side. If hypothetically every single person on that side of the town got the insurance and warranty and had all their pipes fixed, it would help substantially. We could do a measurement, and it could very possibly drop it down enough to add a few more buildings or whatnot. That's very possible. If we're able to fix all the I&I problem over there, we would definitely have a lot more capacity. We are hopeful that people will take advantage of the warranty. And then once again, you can sign up and take $8,500 and you can cancel if you want. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can cancel. You don't sign any contract or anything. It's just a 30-day waiting period, and they say you can't have pre-existing conditions. So once again, if you are not aware of your system and you sign up, then you're fine. So does that help answer your question?
I think so. I was specifically interested to poke around and see if there's any way that warranty could be used to help mitigate the moratorium on building.
Well, the warranty itself is handled by a private company.
Right.
And so it's individually between homeowners, private property owners, and the company. So we can't use any funds. We do collect, I think it's 50 cents off each homeowner we'll be collecting, and we're actually planning on using that towards people who need assistance. So it's going into a pot to help with people who need assistance with their utilities. But if you look at it, it's not really a whole lot. $50 a year for, the residents to sign up is not a whole lot of money. But I don't know that I can state specifically. All I can say is that the way it would help is it would be able to help mitigate, resolve the issues on that side of town. It's a separate situation. The moratorium that I've been talking about with council, it needs to take place because we need to stop having sewer be hooked up. And we're just trying to be fair about the whole thing. Now, I can tell you right now, we're not exactly sure. We know we've met capacity. Does that mean we can add 2 homes? Does that mean we can add a small business? Does that mean we can't even have a garden hose worth of sewer going through? I don't know. So we charge our engineers with that question and working on it right now. And we'll be presenting to the council as soon as we have that information so we can say exactly what we need to do. I know we have, I can think of 2 homes off the top of my head we're trying to put in right now, trying to build. Projects are coming and going, mostly just coming. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Other questions? Kristen?
I moved here from Phoenix, Arizona, and they had just instituted this kind of insurance a few years before I left. And at first, everybody thought it was some big scam because it was a private company, and we heard about it through mysterious means. But they had to put some articles in the paper about it so that people understood what was the value of this insurance, which I think was considerably cheaper in Phoenix. And it was at the point where all of the older housing had clay sewer lines, and they were all aging apart. Like they were just crumbling, including mine. And so it was really important that they did this right then, because it enabled people to fix all those $8,000 sewer lines without paying that money out of pocket.
As a follow-up to what Kristen said, Kristen and I and Gail and others are on an outreach subcommittee, and this would be an important communications to share out and maybe have it be a partnership between the City of Tillamook and the Housing Commission Outreach Committee. And because you're obviously the most knowledgeable, if it were something that the city, I'm kind of going outside of the scope, so apologies to my committee members, but I'm suggesting that if you were to write an article with the ask and the rationale, that perhaps we could be the conduit for sharing that out and elevate the message through our channels that we've built up.
That's a great idea. I will say we have been working really hard on getting the word out. We put on our website, we put on social media. I mention it every single Tuesday when I do the radio updates. We have submitted it, the Headlight Herald. In fact, the Headlight Herald asked me yesterday, I wrote up a whole page to present to and I sent over the Headlight Herald. So, I mean, I'm happy to do anything we can do. I feel like I've done a lot, but we're happy to do more. I don't know what else I can do.
You have to do it more than once.
To the commission.
Sounds like he is. Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while. Yes, I would suggest maybe to TJ's attention, and then we can figure out how to disseminate it.
Oh, sure.
At the very least, we could be sending on your article that is in the Tillamook through our system too, so it gets a wider audience.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I have a question. So I get it that there's a moratorium on building. Are there many
There's not a moratorium right now. There's no moratorium. We're just discussing it.
Oh,
Just want to
okay,
make
all
that.
right. Well, it's a possibility. So are there how many houses on that side of town could be rehabilitated and to provide better housing of structures that already exist?
So most likely the moratorium would not include rehabilitation of existing homes because they'll be using existing sewer.
Right, that's what I mean. So is there a way to enhance more or create more housing by rehabilitating some structures that already exist? Is there much of that going on in that side of town?
Oh, you're asking if there's a lot of that going on right now?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, Just for all of you, if you were interested, if you go to our very first meeting of the month, each meeting, first council meeting of the month, I have a full operations report, everything going on in the city, and that includes our planning report, which goes through all the different projects that are in place. And I couldn't pull it up, but it's pretty detailed, everything going on. We have Public Works, I have every department's in there represented. So in there, they'll give you statistics of the different projects underway. I am not aware of too many rebuilds. I mean, there are definitely people doing construction on their homes. There's a home that's been proposed off of Alder, there's one off of Linden. So there's a couple of homes being built, or getting ready to be built, I should say.
I guess what I was asking really was if there are houses that exist that need to be rehabilitated and they're not, is that a source of quote, new housing that already exists?
No, we would have to that would be vetted during the process of moratorium the council puts in place. But we're not concerned about existing sewer systems. So if you're rehabilitating a home and, if it's a home, even if you're adding a little bit of square footage, the fact is it's still using the same sewer system. So it's not an issue of the existing sewer, just be adding on. So if you took one home and you wanted to rehabilitate it into two homes, then that would be a concern.
Okay.
So that's something we'll have to, the moratorium, if there is a moratorium, it will have to specifically state what the council needs to put in place. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? I have one, so I'm waiting for everybody else. Long-term, for the funding of the improvements that you're going to need, are you looking at a bond issue, or what would be the funding source for the big picture?
Well, we first have to identify what needs to be done.
Right.
That's the really big issue. So with the water, we are currently working on the I&I. There's two pieces to it. One is the I&I study, which we're working on to identify all the areas that could be fixed. As you know, the city had done some community development block grant replacements before I came here, and that helped. But we need to get the wastewater plan also updated. The engineers have to go out and study everything. That will then generate a list of what needs to be done. Do we need to try to upgrade the pipe size? Do we need to put in a different line for redundancy? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? In order to, we have to know that. After we know that, then we'll know what the costs are, and we'll be able to then, I don't know that we need to go out for a bond. There's a lot of money coming in from the federal government for wastewater infrastructure. I'm hoping we can utilize a lot of that. I'm really hopeful that our community will work together. I know the college is already committed to trying to help get that money. I'm sure everyone else will be very, very happy to help or support, and we will be going after all the money. My last hope was to ever do a bond issue. Then we're just spending money on one-time capital project. We're spending, reoccurring payments. But certainly it'd be an option if we need to do that. We need to get it fixed. That's really important. There's a lot of things we need to get fixed, and we're working really hard on doing those.
Well, I'm guessing we'll have a letter of support from this group. I'm surprised if you didn't get that.
Well, that'd be fantastic. I think the biggest, after we get the wastewater master plan updated and we know what we need to do, and we have that list of projects, that's where we're going to really need the support. We need to support to seek out and obtain the funding. So to me, this is just a huge project. I'm really grateful the county was willing to provide us that money to help. It's going to be very significant.
Ms. has a question online. Are you there?
Yes, I have a couple of clarifying questions, but then I also want to lift up the fact that Daniel did put a question in the chat as well. So the clarifying question that I have is around the insurance for folks on the west side. Are there existing issues that are known that then homeowners would call to have the insurance utilized? Or is it kind of a placeholder so that when you're doing your research and you identify things that need to be taken care of, that homeowner would be notified and then they would call and ask for the utilization of that insurance?
So right now we are mapping out the issues, and the city has a pretty good idea of what those issues are. However, we've not released that I mean, you could come ask. It's not private, it's not, private information. It's just, we haven't released that information, and well, the main reason not doing that is we haven't finished the study. And the study won't be finished until later this year, probably end of summer, early fall. The second reason is if we release that information, then you know you have a pre-existing condition. It's like signing up for health insurance. If you don't know you have a pre-existing condition, you have a better chance of getting life or health insurance or whatnot. So it's not that we're trying to be secretive. For me, it's a timing issue. If people can get in and get signed up for their warranty and get on there, then their line's working fine now, and next month it goes out, then they can get it fixed. Does that answer your question, Miss?
It does. I'm curious if, just anecdotally, are we talking about 50% of the west side is dealing with some issues? Do you have kind of an idea of how many homes are impacted?
Well, I don't have that information in front of me. I can tell you it's probably at least 40 or 50%. I mean, if you take a look at our wastewater flows with a 500,000 gallon wastewater daily average, and then we hit over 7 million, even with these minor floods that we had, even with the large, even not even with the floods, but just the large rain, we're still hitting $4 or $5 million or million gallons, supposed dollars, million gallons a day. That's a substantial increase. And if you take a look at our city, we're not very big. So we have a lot of rainwater coming into our system. So as you can see, it's huge. We've had, and I don't know, it's not all lateral lines. I mean, it's our main lines too. We've had just within the last couple of months, the Public Works Department has replaced at least 3 or 4 different manholes that were, the bottom of them were just completely gone. I mean, they were just leaking right into the ground. They were, a lot of our system was built in the 1910s. It's clay, it wears out, it's brick, the mortar wears out, the brick's still there, the mortar's gone. I mean, it's old, it's failing. If you take a look at our streets, you can see what shape they're in. Well, our wastewater system is in far worse shape than the streets.
Whoa, that's saying a lot.
Can you read the question in the chat?
Oh, okay.
Can you remind me again what the I&I inflow and infiltration?
It stands for inflow and infiltration. And essentially, inflow is when water comes directly in, like if you have a downspout that's going right into the sewer. Back in the 30s, they would just hook it right into the sewer. It was easy, you got rid of the water, but can't legally do that anymore. So that's inflow. Infiltration was when water seeps back in. So if you imagine a line that's got some tree roots going into it, the rainwater is going to seep into the lines. Of course, on the back side of that, the flip side is that the sewer is seeping out, which is also not good. So it's essentially rainwater and groundwater coming into our system, I&I, inflow and infiltration.
Thank you.
Sarah, you had somebody online?
Sure, so the question, just for the benefit of the group, and I believe Nathan, you can probably see this. To reduce sewer capacity, are there any incentives to disconnect downspouts or put in permeable pavers instead of asphalt or cement driveways?
We don't have any incentives in place at this time. Those are certainly good ideas. One of the things that the city does not have is a stormwater utility. And it's something I want to look at in the future. I know it doesn't sound exciting to our residents, but it's very important for our environment. We have a very high amount of water here, and we need to look at that. As far as, we don't have any incentives to disconnect downspouts, except that is a federal law that you can't have it in there. And that's why we're mapping out. We're going to have to send it out to everyone and let them know what's going on. So we're really hopeful that the public will be willing to get the insurance and start fixing their issues. I did have one realtor. I talked to many realtors, and one of them talked to me, asked me if he could just buy the insurance for all his properties. And unfortunately, you can't do that unless you're the homeowner. If you own all those properties, that's fine, but you can't just buy it for your neighbors. That would be nice, but you can't. It has to be for the homeowner.
Okay.
So, otherwise,
So Nathan, you need to call the police chief back, don't forget that.
Need what, I'm sorry?
Oh, you need to call the police chief back, don't forget to call him. Thank you for spending so much time with us.
I will call him. I'm actually, after this meeting, I'm going to head over to the Every 15 Minutes assembly at the high school that they're doing. I went over to support them during the mock crash yesterday, and as you know, that's a really good timing with what happened recently. It's been heartbreaking, but helpful. So,
Again, thank you for spending so much time with us, very much appreciated, and come back anytime.
You're very welcome. I am more than happy to work with TJ on a letter, whatever I can do, be happy to do so.
Okay.
Maybe
Thank you.
TJ, if you don't mind just getting back with me and kind of giving me some direction on what you're looking for, that would be great.
Absolutely, Nathan. I appreciate you speaking today, and also keep in mind that we may have some capacity to help in other ways in the future, so let's continue to collaborate and talk.
Fantastic. Fantastic, thank you.
Oh.
And just so you know, that the warranty is for the whole city, and the west side has just as many problems as the east side. It just happens that we have more capacity on the west side.
And thanks for your dedication to this issue, Nathan.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Just want what's best for our community. It's all I care about. So.
Okay, well, thank you, and I guess we'll move on our agenda.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
TJ has a discussion on formation of an executive committee
Yes.
that we have not created before as the Housing Commission.
That is correct, Ed. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and so folks can see what the intent of this committee is. What we're asking for today is consideration from the Housing Commission, as well as we're asking for a vote to form this executive committee. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we can talk a little bit about what its purpose is and what it will be doing. So I'm hoping that I can share with just a single screen. Give me one moment.
If you need sharing ability, let me know.
Okay. It's not going to share.
Oops.
Not the,
Tiny.
You'll have to
Even
read
with
it to
us.
us.
Yes.
I can, yeah.
it's weird, the computer is not giving me all those options on the bottom that allows me to make it larger. Let's go with this. Hey, I figured it out. Okay.
That's better.
So the executive committee, we're asking to form this executive committee for a couple of different reasons. As many of you know, we've added a new finance committee recently. We're doing a lot of amazing and great work. We have dollars to spend. All of these things mean that we need to make sure that we're really coordinated at a high level between our committees and our housing leadership. So the intent of the executive committee, first off, is for each of the chairs of each committee on the Housing Commission to meet once per month with staff. Their goal is to be informed about developments affecting the business of the Housing Commission and its committees, to collaborate on overlapping or potentially missing pieces, and to act whenever matters arise that require attention or immediate action. They have a couple of intended purposes in addition to that overarching statement. The first is to review the operations of the Housing Commission and its committees to ensure that decisions are in line with the rules and the policies of the Housing Commission, including those that are defined by the Board of County Commissioners. Its intent is to review and make recommendations on matters that would require the approval of the full commission, including drafting policies and procedures and making amendments to the bylaws. The third function would be to develop a pipeline and nominate potential candidates and vacancies to ensure continuity as terms and members cycle out. Keep in mind, and all of you should have a copy of the bylaws, I sent them out. The bylaws has a nominating committee, but we haven't had a nominating committee seated. So this function is not currently in place. The executive committee would make recommendations to seat new members. They would take on that function as well as some other executive functions. And then finally, its purpose would be to exercise any powers or responsibilities that may be delegated to the executive committee by the full Housing Commission from time to time, which are consistent with the Housing Commission bylaws. So I'd like to open up the floor for conversation and questions about the intent of the executive committee and hear what folks have to say. And Ed, I think I'm handing this back over to you at this point to MC.
Yeah, well, we want to have a vote on it to form this group, and if there's any serious questions here, I think it's a great idea. It's something that most organizations have to facilitate their work. The nominating is very important. There'll be legislative issues which may require very quick response, things like that, and won't fit in with our monthly meeting. I think we were talking about doing this with a Zoom type meeting or Microsoft Teams.
That is correct.
So
All of our committee
require-
meetings will remain online.
Yeah. So, Barbara.
Well, excuse me, I have a concern for the current chairs who didn't know they would be signing up for this. How do they feel? Maybe, I don't want to put anybody on the
I guess the
spot.
question is who would be, is it the chairs?
Yeah.
Probably all of
That's what I
us,
said.
right?
The chairs, that's what I heard.
The chairs of each committee,
The
so
chairs
that
of
we're
each-
able to have a higher level conversation about all of the business of the Housing Commission that's going on.
I think it's a great idea, and I don't know that the chairs knew that they were gonna do that, so.
I just wanted to comment as far as, chairing the legislative committee. TJ did bring this up via email to the chairs.
Okay.
And we were notified and given information about it, and I absolutely support it.
Barb, I
because
love your.
As far as the legislative committee is concerned, there are interconnections that are tie-ins that need to happen with the development code committee, with the outreach committee, so that way we can coordinate. And especially when we were looking at gaining legislative support last year, when we were trying to support legislation, it was very difficult to get everybody on the commission involved to sign off on a letter of support. So it would be really nice to have that tie-in and coordination in between meetings, instead of saying, okay, each of us individually are going to sign up.
Right.
And with such a small group, it would be nice to have that coordination.
So
I
who-
should have known TJ would have given you a little prelim.
Tim Borman, I see you up there in the corner. Do you have a question?
Besides the chairs of the committees, who else is going to be in attendance at these meetings or be a part of the executive committee?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Borman. Myself will be at those meetings, Director Absher will be at those meetings, and Commissioner Scar, as our liaison, will be invited as an advisory role to contribute to those meetings on a regular basis.
And they are public,
And they are public, of course, like all of our meetings are.
A follow-up question, will the chair of our commission be attending those meetings?
If we were to pass and approve the executive committee today, we would have a conversation about who would be chairing that executive committee. That is still open for discussion.
I think he was asking if Ed was gonna be on that committee, correct?
Yes, Ed would be on that committee as the chair of the Housing Commission. Thank you.
Well, I haven't heard of any chairs resigning.
I guess double bang.
Well, if we're to that point, we can just do a hand vote, right?
I wanted to make a comment
Sure.
first. Figured that was a good way to get it in. As the chair of two subcommittees, I would say that I think that coordination between the subcommittees is so essential. And not just for the chairs, but for all the committees to know what's going on in all the committees, and to be able to communicate that information back to the Housing Commission is important. I fully support this, and TJ did warn you.
Oh, good.
Thanks for looking out for us, Barbara.
Well,
So we make a
should we, would somebody make a motion and we'll vote?
I make a motion to approve the executive committee.
I second that.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, let's just raise hands then, and Tim can do it too. He's up there. All in favor?
So we have Tim and Miss both voted.
Okay, great. Sarah, do you want to kind of lead into Commissioner Scar's comments?
Certainly. I'm gonna go ahead and scoot over here just a moment, and then while you're talking, I'm gonna plug my computer in because now we've got another issue. But luckily, it's easily fixable. So, the Housing Commission is continuing to evolve. Your roles are shifting. There's new things being added and new purpose to what you are doing, especially we are rounding the corner to a grant reward process, which is really exciting. With that, it's been called to my attention the last week or so. There's been a lot of dialogue about the award process, specifically focused to AMI limits, and then also the definition of workforce. I know there was a very robust conversation in the Public Education and Outreach Subcommittee the other day. And then TJ and I have talked about this, and I visited with Commissioner Scar. And it's definitely, in my opinion, the right time to talk about this as the Finance Subcommittee continues to finalize the framework and the process for the grant review. And so I asked Commissioner Scar maybe to lead a conversation today about kind of where we're at. The bylaws talk about, who we serve. There was a lot of work, a lot of meetings that went into that. And before we finish our process with the Finance Subcommittee, I think it's important to have a conversation today. So Commissioner Scar, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to echo that this is a really exciting time for the Housing Commission. When we started, and there are a handful of us here that were here when we started, there was a lot of vision about where we hoped the Housing Commission would go. We hoped that someday we would have subcommittees and we would have money and we would be, impacting code changes. We'd have the property tax exemption. I mean, there's all of this dream out there for what we could possibly do. And this is a really exciting time because so much of that is coming to fruition. It is a perfect time to talk about, wow, look at where we've been and look at where we are today. So I felt like it was a really good time to look at where we've been because we are in a changing time where the state now has a definition of workforce housing, which they didn't have when we started. And we did a lot of work around what kind of housing are we really focusing on? What is important to us? In the absence of a definition from outside of this organization in this county, what is the definition from inside this organization in this county? And I think that now we're at a point where it's like, wow, the state's giving a definition. What does that mean for us? Because we started with our own. And so that's really, I think, where I want to start the conversation today, is looking at our founding documents, reflecting back to the conversation that we had and how we came to our decision as to what this Housing Commission was going to work on. Because I think it's really relevant to see if that's still the right place for us to be, and just bring everybody into that first really pivotal year of conversation, so that we have it all in the same, grounded in the same space, to jump off to give some guidance to the Finance Committee as to which slice of what we have previously committed to are we looking at, or are we still looking at all of it? So does that sound like a good conversation to have, that helpful for the Finance Committee, I hope, as they go forward? So I want to just bring everybody's attention first to the board order that you all have, and just make sure that everyone has had a chance to see that. It is the founding document. It is where the commissioners started with the Housing Commission. Of course, the Housing Task Force occurred before that and worked its way up to the Housing Commission. But there was a lot of conversation in choosing what would go into the board order, and you can see there's an amendment there. That it originally started at 125% of area median income. And then I think we started working on the property tax exemption, and that had 120% at its cap. And so we decided, let's align with what does exist. And I think that's where that 120 came from, was it aligned with the property tax exemption. Others, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so others who were part of the founding, if I say something, you're like, that's not how that went. Because I'm going to ask all of you who were founding members for some reflections in just a minute. So that was where we came to that 120%. And the up to 120% was just really looking and saying, what housing is needed across our community and where do we want to be. So I think it's important again. That's where the 120 started from, was the property tax exemption. And then I think just, we said that we desire to provide a framework to support development and preservation activities that would increase and or preserve workforce housing. And I think that's just another good thing to remind ourselves that was a very difficult conversation. We were like, are we only building new? Do we believe in preserving what's here? Where's that balance? What's the commission's real job? And so that's just another important call out for us all to recognize that's in here. The other one is number 4. The board desires to have a commission to create, maintain, and implement a strategic housing plan for the entire county. So we did a housing needs analysis as part of the work of this commission, but it's aging, right? And so we're in a really interesting time with the changing wages across the county and of course across the state and nation, and looking at what housing has been developed. And so where are our numbers in that? Where is our strategic plan, and are we still where we should be with the strategic housing plan? So I think that's another great conversation that we'll want to have, not necessarily today, but something that we want to look at. So then the other piece of it was the bylaws. And I will admit, I think I have a printed version that's not the most up to date, but I don't think it'll change the conversation that we want to queue up. So that was looking into the history. Now the bylaws, if I recall, took us 5 months-ish, maybe 6 months. And it took us that amount of time because the conversation was deep and the conversation was difficult because we were deciding, again, how do we define the kind of housing that we want to work on? We had affordable, we had attainable, we talked about, is it ownership, is it just rental, is it just, what is workforce, and what about the people that have a housing need that may not be working right now? Are we working on that or are we not? And so I think what was important in the history piece, just that we kind of captured some of that in our history, which was to recognize that the Housing Commission has refined and expanded its understanding of its role to address not only workforce housing, but also other areas of need for those who earn up to 120% of county median income, such as seniors, the disabled, and the homeless. So I think we also said that we anticipate housing needs may change, but the Commission's focus will remain on encouraging housing that serves lower income residents. Again, this was a difficult, deep conversation, and it was hard to come to the right words and the right focus. And so I want to make sure that as we look forward and as we look at what we're doing next, this is a good time for us to kind of revisit that a little bit and see, does that still strike at our hearts? Is that still the right place to be? And where I'd love to start is just reflections from people who were part of that conversation to kind of share maybe just how that conversation went, what it felt like for you, and where it sits with you today, and then we'll open up to everyone. Who would like to kick that off?
I'll start, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, as an employer representative, so the documents we started, we formed the committee 4 years ago. Is that right? Or the commission? Is that right?
18.
Well, 2 years are gone. So.
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like where we started and where we are today, like you reflected, has really broadened. I think the pandemic has affected some of our conversations. Obviously, from the very beginning, I've been focused on the school district and getting new teachers, places to live. We had somebody from the Creamery at the beginning, Sarah Bobine, who also was very active, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that you bring up the property tax exemption as the reason that we morphed to the 120, and I forgot that piece, and I was part of that committee. Yeah. And I think we're the first county to take advantage of that state opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know right now how many people have taken advantage of that in the county. And so hearing that Manzanita's excited makes me feel good. Like we don't know what was gonna stimulate housing, but we had a meeting. So one of the big memories in my mind was the meeting we had out at TBCC.
Right.
And that room was full of community leaders. And we came down with 3 recommendations, right, from that community input meeting. I don't remember 120% of area median income as being like a focus of the conversation, but I remember there was a lot of opposing views in the room. I mean, Justin, you were there at that meeting, and you brought a different point of view, right? So I feel like I don't want to get stuck on the 120, but I think we've had a lot of presentations over the last 4 years that were broader than the lower income. This is funny, Erin, because one of the big memories I have was sitting in this room and you talking about we need to address the missing middle. And so when I think about the missing middle, for me it doesn't mean lower income. And so those are my reflections that stick in my head. And so I don't know if I answered answered your call, but those are the kind of things I remember about difficult conversations. I remember Barbara talking about seniors, you know what I mean? And so that's what I have.
Yeah, aren't in the workforce. Well, and my greatest memory is when we talked about the mission statement. We really tried to capture with the greatest housing needs, kind of giving us that caveat because we knew things were going to change over time. And so that's what's always stuck in my head. And when I was reminded in the meetings of the outreach on Tuesday, it was like, oh, we're capped at 120% of area. That didn't click until TJ brought it to my attention, even though I was part of that discussion. Because in my head, we're serving the greatest housing needs. So I would be open to revisiting that 120 as well.
I think as we look forward, depending on kind of the direction of the Housing Commission when it comes to where we're gonna get funds from, that 120 is pretty standard when it comes to, like if we're looking for grants or things like that, that's the highest you're gonna see.
Yeah.
So even the 125 kicks you out of that. So I agree with that number, and I actually love the summary, because I'm sitting here thinking, no, this is exactly where we should be. So all the things and the ways that we got there, for me, you guys know I've been big on home ownership. That's kind of been my squeaky wheel of like, don't forget about home ownership, it's very important. And so I think what's hard for people that don't deal in area median income is actually knowing what those numbers are. So like, for example, Habitat serves 30 to 80% of the area median income. And so like of the 41 families that have applied, the majority of them fit within that because they're a single income earning household. Most of the time, you're gonna get over that 80% if you have 2 working people in the home. So we see a lot of single income earner households in our program, but up to the 120, you're going to see, it is workforce housing, but you're going to see that more 120 if you have 2 incomes coming in. But sometimes just look up the numbers so you can actually know, like, oh, with a family size of 4, this is $50,000 a year, or whatever that looks like. That way you kind of know the numbers, because it's helpful when dealing with that.
Yeah, and I think we reviewed them a couple times, and TJ might know better than I.
I've got them right here if you want me to share. I can share my screen if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 120% is like 85,000 or something, or it was last time I ran it for a family.
And that's for a household, no matter how many people are in the household.
No, that's for a family of 4.
Family is average.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
average, so TJ's got it. But
Yes.
yeah, I think that's a good point, and one of those things we want to keep remembering,
Yeah.
that it's.
So this is not easy for folks to see in the room.
I can turn the light, I can turn the rest of the lights off.
That would be too dark.
And I could also just very quickly tell you what each.
Yeah.
So the AMI for 120%, for 0 bedrooms, I'm gonna talk about rental rates, not about incomes, because I think that's where we're focusing our attention, is cost of housing.
But we have to talk about it.
Sure, and we'll go to that in just a moment.
Okay, cool.
The 120 maximum rents for an efficiency would be $1,300 a month for no bedrooms. For 1 bedroom at 120, that would be $1,545 a month. For a 2 bedroom, the 120 would be at $1,930 per month. And for a 3 bedroom, the 120 maximum will be at $2,241 per month. And finally for a 4 bedroom, that would be 120% AMI at $2,550 per month. This table that I'm showing you right here is the 100% AMI. So this is actually 20% lower. This is the just 1.0 AMI. For one person, that's $45,000. You can add 20% to that for the maximum 120. For two people, it's $51,000. For three, we're talking about $57,000 per year. So that's typically maybe one income wage earner or two with one child. Four people, $64,000 a year is 100% AMI. For five people, $69,000 per year is 100% AMI. For six, which would fit into a 3-bedroom, would be $74,688. And then for 7 people, we're talking about $80,000, 8 people, $85,000.
Thank you. So I don't want to get into a deep conversation about AMI just yet, but I think it's good to have those numbers in our head and to realize that you're talking about the $45,000 plus the 20%. So someone making in that $50,000 range is at that 120% if they're a single person. So I think it's it's good to have. So I'm gonna.
A clarifying question. So if there are 2 wage earners in the family, it would still cap at the 56 or whatever?
Yes. Doesn't matter.
How
Whatever
many
income.
people, so total household income?
Yes.
So that would be 100, so you get 120%.
So then if you have 2 people making
So Barb, I'm
one.
going to stop just because I really do want to hear from the rest of the folks on screen before we dive into this really deep. And Tim has his hand raised. So Tim, you were part of our founding board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What were your reflections? Tim, can you hear us?
No.
We've lost sound again?
We shouldn't.
Oh, your light's not
We're
on.
hearing some weird computerized noise in the background.
It kind
Yeah,
of
I
was
hear that. Let me see. Oh, you know what? Let me, hang on just a sec. There's, is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Tim, we wanted to hear your reflections.
Not sure I necessarily have a reflection right now, but I do have just a point of clarification regarding the AMI. That reflects gross income, gross, not net income. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's just important to put that into perspective of what kind of dough are we talking about. That's not money that they have to spend. That's money before they have of deduction taken from the payroll.
Thank you. Yeah. Miss?
I just want to share, I don't know, TJ, if you happen to have the 120% AMI, but for visual folks, to look at the 120 at rental rates and then look at the 100 at income is very difficult to really process, if it's possible to. I think in comparison, it was 68,400 for 120 AMI for reference.
Thank you, Miss. Did you have any other reflections from being a founding member that you'd like to share from those early conversations?
Yeah, I want to lift up the fact that we really did talk about the fact that our housing shortage forces some folks into houselessness regardless of their income, and that things have greatly changed since that original conversation. And when we are focusing on workforce housing, as we talked about at that time, like we're adding to the inventory so that we can start ensuring that more, hopefully eventually more, or if any, places would be available for folks. But the up to 120% as opposed to capping it on the bottom end was definitely an intentional part of the conversation, and then allowing the reports to help guide our focus within that that framework. So that's definitely something that I recall from our conversation.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, Carrie.
I just wanted to bring up just conversation we had at the tax exemption group subcommittee. When we were drafting, originally having conversations with the taxing districts and the school districts, That focus of that, the exemption was really trying to focus on that missing middle piece component where there was funding, state and federal funding available for the 60, up to 80% of the AMI. So our conversations ended up being focused for that missing middle component of that 80 to 120%. And then we started looking at the rents, and we had a huge number of conversations about how we're gonna narrow that down, how to make it attainable for that, a county employee, a school district employee. And when, at the end of the day, we were like, okay, well, we can look at a suite of rents, but at the end of the day, we really wanted to focus on that 100% calculation. And that's kind of where that the drafting came from, is that we felt even at just the way the 30% calculation was met, that the rents at that level were getting into more of the premium category. So that's why we kind of looked at it at the end of the day, the average rent needed to be at a 100% level attainable, because we felt that is where most of the people can afford and could budget for. Because I think a lot of people are looking at housing rental rates of $800 to $1,200, $1,300 is kind of what I think people can digest or take advantage of. But I know that the conversation too also wanted to address those people that couldn't fit in a low-income housing. They had made too much income for the low income, but there wasn't, or there was just undesirable housing for those people in that other section. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's another early conversation that's good to recall, is that a lot of chewing happened in that property tax exemption committee to really figure out, is this gonna be a tool that really helps, right? Yeah. Miss, you've got another comment? Can you hear us, Miss?
I can. Is my hand still up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Well, I will take a second just to mention that. Yes, I know missing middle, and I understand all of that, but we are missing everyone right now. There is literally no housing available for anyone under 120. Literally. So if you only qualify for low income housing, there's nothing there. And if you are in the mid-range, there's really nothing there. So I feel like it has shifted more in the direction of needing to be focused on all of the missing inventory and not just in one particular area. And the reason I say that is we want to be open and ready to work with any developer on any project that they might be able to be gathering funds for. So if we're focusing all of our attention away from maybe some of the subsidized housing projects or whatever and towards other areas, we may be missing a really big opportunity for our community.
Thank you, Miss. I appreciate that comment. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly kind of wrap up what we heard from founding members, and then I think it'll be an opportunity for us to open the conversation. I am going to put in a few of my own comments as well as a founding member. It's been a shift for me to become the liaison, where I am no longer a voting member of this commission, and really the work is yours to do, not mine, right? Because I am, as a commissioner, you all are advisory to the commissioners. And so I try not to put a lot of my own pieces into this conversation, because this isn't the space for me to do that. But I will speak just briefly as a founding member when I wore a different hat. So what I did here is that the work that went into the bylaws, there were concerns for all housing. And that we wanted to make sure that was a possibility in this commission. That we were looking at up to 120%, and that we wanted to make sure it could be up to 120%. because we didn't know what the greatest need would be, and we wanted the flexibility to work wherever that greatest need would occur. And I think that's super important for us to keep in mind going forward. That as Ms. said, we don't know who's going to apply to the commission in any particular round. And we want to make sure that whoever's ready to build any kind of housing that needs support, we're able to be there and be a part of that. And that was definitely part of the conversation we had as we looked at the grant funding that might come someday, that's here now, was just that we don't have, certainly not at that point, housing developers that are just, coming in the hundreds that we're gonna have to, really choose between. We wanna be ready to help whoever shows up and is ready to add to the inventory. So I think that is an important piece that we don't wanna lose. The other thing about the 120 is there's a need to remember that we are government. And so people look and say, while these are not directly their tax dollars, these are fees that are being paid, and the ARPA came from the federal government, but people look and say, who are you giving my tax dollars to? Is this really something that only government can do? Or is this just making somebody who's building high-end housing more money? What are we doing here? So there's a real need to maintain some level of awareness that we are government, and government does what private industry cannot. So I think there's a piece there where that 120 sits as well. And why we looked at that 120, 125 is it was just like, yeah, there's beyond that, we're getting into what's being charged in market rate properties, and is that really where government belongs? So it's an interesting piece of the conversation. So again, I think we want to be available to look at all types of housing that may come to us, is what I'm hearing. And that we have the opportunity as a committee and a commission each year to determine what is the greatest need right now? And where might we want to focus in our grant program right now to address what's the greatest need right now? We have the housing study, which, as we talked about, is aging a bit. Right? So as to whether or not that is has a focus for us or not, good question, because things have changed a bit. But really it did say we need everything. So I think that's where we're coming to the table in this conversation, is that there was a desire for a broad range of opportunities to help. And I know some of you have been digging really deep in the finance committee, and I would love to just open the conversation a little bit further at this point to hear where that has put us and see if that changes anything in where we need to go.
I might just add a comment that isn't directly related, but all the other activities we do, the property tax exemption, the looking for buildable sites, the shovel-ready sites, the text changes to the county ordinance, those all affect all price ranges, presumably. So.
However, with this written the way it is, we should be exclusively working on things that only affect a certain subpopulation. So I do think that this being codified in writing is problematic, and then renders the question as to whether or not that is the scope of the work of this commission. And that is of great concern to me, that if this is codified in this manner, then if we're looking at buildable lands, and they might be used to construct a quadplex on the market that has what will presumably be more affordable rents as a result of just increasing units and density, is that not something that we are allowed to continue to work on because of the language of our board order? I think the board order language is extremely problematic.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Michelle. No one online heard you, and I'm letting Daniel know that we will circle back around in public comment.
Okay.
So I think of it very differently, and from the perspective of when.
So are they hearing us now?
They are, but everybody needs to speak up, especially the folks, because my speaker only goes so far.
Okay,
so they did not. Could you summarize?
Yeah, so I'll recap. And so what Michelle was bringing up is the concern that many of the things that we do affect not only the up to 120%, but affect things beyond that? And if that's codified in our board order, does that keep us from doing the things that would impact those beyond 120? And I would suggest that as long as it is also impacting those that below 120, that is not an issue. If it is specifically outside of that, right now, you're right, it's a concern and something we need to address. I think if it's the whole range, it's not an issue. But Cami, you had some thoughts?
I was more thinking, because I was here when this was written, and you always have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So like for Habitat, we started with our Ramps and Rails program, we serve seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. That's because we knew we couldn't serve everybody. So we had to start with what we felt was the most vulnerable, the most greatest need right now. And so that's not to say that's where we'll always be, and that's not to say this is where we'll always be, but I feel like at this point, we really need to ask ourselves, what are we planning to actually do to support even up to the 120 before we now open it to the, I don't know. That's just my thoughts of like, and maybe that's small thinking of like focusing in one area, but I also feel like at some point this can be changed, right? When we want it to change, it's not set in stone forever. And maybe this is when it changes, but I've always thought of it as greatest need right now to be able to focus on that area.
And as the large employer representative, I'm suggesting that the greatest need economically for our community is precisely how, I think Miss explained it very well. The business community of working people, that I think this is where I've been operating for almost 2 years under a misunderstanding of what workforce means, and this definition has come as a surprise to me and to my organization. It means that the vast majority of people that we employ don't meet this criteria, and the role that I'm representing here is not benefiting the group that I'm representing, which is large employers. When you break down the income levels of the average working individual or couple in Tillamook County, they exceed the 120%. I'm not suggesting that the housing and affordability and availability of housing for individuals making up to 120% of AMI is not an important population. I'm just not understanding why we would limit ourselves to that subset of the greater population given the crisis that we're facing with housing and the crisis that our employers and the people who are working here are facing because they cannot recruit and retain employees due to lack of housing. To me, if we are using our collective intellect and human capital in this body to identify key strategies across the board to increase the number of units, rather than focusing on how much rent costs, focus on how many units we can build, and that might mean ADUs. And this presupposes that if we have a landlord that wants to build an ADU, and they want to benefit from something that we're doing to make that easier, we would require that they, as a private homeowner landlord, mandate a certain rent be charged for that unit. Or is that the business that we want to get into? And is that going to help? I think that's really the question. If it creates more barriers, more bureaucracy, more red tape, and doesn't actually build more units, does it make sense that that's what we would limit ourselves to doing? So I feel very strongly that on behalf of the employers with whom I speak regularly, we need to expand the focus and prioritize getting more inventory across multiple, all available means. And I want to add one last comment, and then I promise I'll be quiet. There's a reason that Holden Creek and Greenlight exist, and the reason that Paul Daniels is able to do what he does is he has the money to do it. I don't think the man owes anybody. I think it's all cash. If the market were going to take care of this itself, it would have happened by now. So somebody needs to be moving the levers that are getting in the way of private investment. And if this body is not the one doing it, I don't know who is. And that concerns me. That's all I have to say.
Ms. has comment online.
I would like to remind us that at the time we had our conversation, the inventory that did exist was for folks who were above 120% AMI. There were houses that were affordable to folks either out in Oceanside or in other places. So there was inventory. Not a lot of inventory, but there was inventory. Now, home values in town have gone up over $100,000 in 1 year. So there is still inventory out there. It's even further out of reach for most income levels within the community. It is an unfortunate situation all the way around. I would completely agree with that. But when we start talking about percentages of individuals living in Tillamook County, we also want to focus our energy and time on the greater number of folks. So yes, there's always going to be the periphery above 120 AMI, but I would be really curious to know how many households that's impacting versus the total lack of housing. And then just recognize that that is the only group that actually has inventory at this time to be able to work with. Thank you.
Can I say that I love what you had to say about the counting the units? Like, I think that's such a cool measurable because I feel like we don't necessarily have a lot of measurables. Like to be able to have a goal around, regardless of what area, I just love that. Like that made me go, ooh, I like that. Like getting units, being a part of getting units on the ground. Because somebody in that unit means a house is now open up. So it's all this, cyclical effect that's gonna happen if housing is. I just loved that. Thought that was really good.
I'd like us just to think for a minute about the use of AMI, because the AMI is calculated on the existing people, right? One of the key problems that I keep hearing over and over again from people like Michelle and people like Sarah, we can't hire people at the higher levels of income at professional jobs because there's nowhere for them to find a place to live. Like many instances of examples of people who had accepted jobs and then had to rescind it months later because they couldn't find any place to live. So by using the existing AMI, we're kind of encouraging a kind of inertia because we're not allowing ourselves to address what would necessitate a higher than 120% because those people are not here yet. Because they can't come here because we don't have the houses for them. So I don't know really how to think about that, but like I'm a social scientist, so I want to try to understand what does using current AMI preclude us from doing when we're trying to also address the people who are not here yet, who can't come because we don't have enough units. So if we become slaves to AMI, we're kind of limiting our community's options because we need those professionals, healthcare workers and building inspectors and all that stuff to help us push forward. If we can't bring them in, we're in trouble.
And I would suggest we struggle to bring in our workforce at all levels.
Right.
That it doesn't start at a certain AMI, that these are the people we can't get. These are the people we can't get. So I think my concern would be around the floor because we need these people and we need these people. So I'm gonna just put that one out on the table. That I think we need to talk about. Where do we go? Where is the top? 200? 400? What are we building? What are we not building? And maybe that will be a place that we come back to for the starting conversation is, what is too much, right? But Ms., is your hand still up? And I think somebody over on this, okay. Barbara had a comment.
Well, I'm wondering if it needs to be codified in the bylaws, any number. If our mission is the greatest housing need, and I understand that government, there's funding out there, there's ranges that you can get certain funding for. that makes sense, but why does it have to be codified that we have to stick with that number? Why not, why have any number in there? I mean, we all know, maybe we want to say something, we don't want to be involved in the super high-end, short-term rental, second home, but, you know, those aren't people who are working here. You know, so if it's just people who are working here or live here, if they're, you know, seniors not working, I mean, or people with disabilities not working, so that definition still has trouble in my mind. But why do we need to, we want people to come here, we want to be able to fill the jobs for the people who are teaching, who are our RNs, who are our firefighters, who are working at McDonald's, we need it all. And so I don't see why we have to have a cap at all. Codified. I mean, in our discussions, in our work groups, in our tax exemption programs or whatever program we come up with, you know, then we can put the caps that we need to put the caps in to make it saleable, workable, efficient, whatever. But codified in our bylaws, I would like to have no cap.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah?
I just want to circle back a little bit to what Ed reflected on, which is that a lot of the work that we've been doing, in fact, doesn't stick to any percentage.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you at all.
Okay, I'm sorry. A lot of the work that we've been doing already doesn't have an ear to AMI. It has an ear to units. When we liaison with developers, we don't make them swear that the only thing they're going to build is going to be rent up to a certain point. We're just trying to get units. When we look at land, we're just trying to get units. When we contemplate ordinance changes, we're just trying to get units. And the fact that the orders say something different is problematic. And the fact that we state a number anywhere is problematic. And that's just what I want to say.
So I just have one other thing that sticks in my mind. We learned that housing in Nescoin area, the needs there, and North County and Central County are all very unique. And so in my mind, we've tried to be very, very flexible and have lots of tools in our toolkit. And I think the work that we've done on the finance side of things, our grant opportunity has tried to make, you know, we want it to pencil out for developers. We want to be able to address problems if it's system development. So I think I'm on the same page. I would like us to codify something that's more broad. And obviously, we as a commission are not going to approve a grant to somebody who's going to build some high-end homes. That's not, I mean, workforce is still my priority. But realizing that workplace, you know, is the teachers who are starting out at a certain wage, or, you know, and I have to be honest, Near Space, our higher end employees are figuring it out. They're finding a way to find. So a young engineer with a family, though, has a lot of issues, right? So.
What you said about, I don't think the grant necessarily has to match. The grant and how we fund money can look very different than how we function as an entire commission. I don't think we can have it, you know, we can specify in the grant what we're willing to give money to. That isn't necessarily the same. It's been a good conversation because I used to get stuck on the 120 because I know that as a nonprofit, you need to have those numbers because nobody's going to give you money. But here's the deal. Are we a government agency? Who's going to give? We're not going for foundation grants at this point, right? So this is where I hope the conversation goes is in the future, what does that look like? If that is in the future, we will need to look at those because you will not get funded for certain projects. But we're also probably going to apply on behalf of certain projects that fit within their criteria. So I don't know that the 120 in my head anymore is a problem. I like it. Let's go for that.
Well, I think we want to support communities to, I've heard of funding sources that will help areas that could be improved, but they're not being improved by developers because look at putting the roads in, the infrastructure, the water and sewer, the first person who takes it on has to bear the burden. And I've heard in the state, and you all are probably more familiar with, they're finding monies to get that started and get it, and spread it out over and get the, and I'm doing some work on it to give to Sarah, but I think that's an important place to offset costs so that builders can come in. You know, we have, in the real estate business right now, if you have a person who used to be able to buy a $199,000 home, that's now $299,000 to $350,000, they have the down payment, good luck finding that. And that's, you know, like we're seeing in the back of Garibaldi, the back of Rockaway, some areas, we're seeing those homes that are at least keeping under $400,000 with fitting some of the needs. So, you know, back to the importance of finding monies or helping Rockaway or areas start getting that infrastructure there when there's land there.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been a contractor all my life, and I did a subdivision in 91 in Tillamook. I started it at the end of 5th Street down by Carnahan Park.
Okay.
We developed 16 lots there, and I never would have been able to do it financially if it wasn't for me being able to set up to do the utilities in phases, each block at a time, and sidewalks and approaches as I built the house. That made it loan-free, did it out of pocket with my partner Tom Lenny, got him for the underground utilities, and I did the building. And it worked quite well, but I know there's a risk in that, because some guys come in, start it, make what they want and get the hell out, and you're stuck with a bunch of undeveloped land that now you really can't, someone else had to take over the project. That's why they enacted you go in, you do all utilities first, then they're usable lots. Which makes it very difficult for builders like me to do that, because I don't have $1 million to dump in a project. But doing it in the phase, and I don't know if there's a way to get looking at that in Tillamook, because I know Gary Wright has property, there's guys that have property, but when you're asking them to put $1 million, $2 million up front to start their first house, that's a tough go.
Yeah, and that's been a topic of this committee previously, and actually if you looked at the funding infrastructure, or the original funding, there was a place in there that SDCs and those kinds of things could be possible in those grants. That was originally part of the structure. So I know we're going to have to wrap up, because we're going to leave time for public comment. So what I'm hearing, and I know this isn't probably enough specificity yet for the Finance Committee, but what I'm hearing is that there is a desire to evaluate the 120 and probably look at greater commission work not being capped at the 120, but program by program inside the commission work, it will have limits.
It should have
limits as they are set by the different programs. So if we are to look at the Finance Committee, I'm going to give this about, can I give it 10 more minutes, Sarah? Is that okay? Because we wrap up. I don't want us to be 11 o'clock and not have public
I know we
comment.
have some public comment.
This isn't just from the finance committee. This
No,
is
but it's for the
outreach.
money.
I realize
Oh,
that,
okay.
but the concerns were not about how the monies were going to be used. It was the scope of work of this commission was.
So does the Finance Committee not need
I'm not on the
any?
finance committee.
Who's
I
on the
have
Finance
nothing to do
Committee?
with the finance committee.
Thank you, Chris. Does the Finance Committee need further sort of clarification as to, before you finalize your framework? Or do you think that you have heard enough to know kind of where that framework would best sit before bringing it back to the commission?
Mess, you're our chairman. I think that we've done a lot of great work, and we started it with Jake, and TJ has added a lot of the framework. I mean, what's your impression?
So I think that there's a need to better define what the needs are in Tillamook County. That has to happen, and I think some guidance for the commission, for the committee would be helpful. That said, I think that the Finance Committee is pretty on solid ground in terms of the AMI ranges that we're looking at and the points that we want to allocate to projects. Remember, density also gets points. So you can have a higher AMI project that has a high density and would still be able to get some of those funds and be competitive in that process. But we also have missing middle projects, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 units. And those are the ones that we want to make sure are also competitive, because they're not going to get the units points. Where they're going to get their points is through affordability. And so I think that as the Finance Committee puts together programs, this won't be the last program that we put together with caps and floors. I think that it's important to look at it program by program, but for this grant program, I feel as if we're on solid ground to continue looking at up to 120%. Does that mean that the grant development committee that we formed, the grant committee, can't go out and find other sources of revenue to then point at other programs with very different AMI ranges? Absolutely. That's the reason that we created that committee. This money that's here now, coming from public dollars and being used to actually create units on the ground, I think it's important that we prioritize those units that can't make it happen right now. What I would recommend is that I provide some guidance to the Finance Committee about who in our community is making what ranges of income and who is being boxed out at the current rates. I think that guidance could be helpful both through the Finance Committee as well as to this full commission.
Okay, thank you, because the grants will come to this, so the Finance Committee will make their recommendations once this comes. They will come to this commission for, conversation and further approval, and ultimately to the commissioners for final approval.
Am I hearing also that maybe when you come back and amend the bylaws again to include the executive committee, would that be the time to then work on the language that has 120%?
The executive committee would be the committee to make recommendations to the full housing commission, who would then direct me to enact the changes that have been adopted should they be adopted.
Okay, so I think that I'm definitely hearing a desire to revisit both what will be the bylaws and the board order to reflect that potentially change from that 120 and to find language that feels more appropriate to the work that's being done, with a recognition that we really want to frame ourselves in a way that we can support getting units on the ground for all, right? That regardless of, and that there is a recognition that somewhere within there be a statement that does just clarify that we are not interested in the top end. That we all sit here at this table, and I remember having this conversation in the founding parts of this. We had this conversation which said, those of us sitting here today know what we mean, but we will not be the same people sitting here in the future. And we are into one of those steps in the future where we are not all the same people sitting here, right? So that conversation that we had then that said we need to have some form of a top and some really clear statement, because people will change and we don't want the Housing Commission to lose the reason that it was founded, right? And so I think it's time to adjust that. I think this is a perfect conversation, a perfect time. But I think it's also important to put language in there that reflects today's idea of where does the top? What is it not appropriate for this committee to be considering? And I throw that out there because the housing study talked about how many vacation homes and second homes would be needed in the next 20 years. That's part of our housing study because they looked at the full gamut, right? So somewhere within our documents, we still need to reflect where we stop.
And I think those documents are the grant documents, like when we're granting things. I don't think that has to be the founding documents. I think our goal, one of our things is just units, like you're saying, units on the ground. And then when it comes to actually like, how are we getting units on the ground? Those are gonna look like different conversations with these documents. I think they're two separate things in my head.
I think what I hear Erin saying is, if there are 15 new people here in 5 years or whatever, or 10 years, and they look at it and they go, well, we need more vacation houses. That's what we need here because our economy is failing because whatever. I mean, I think what Erin is trying to say is we want to have that kind of, we don't want that. This group doesn't want that. And so to project that desire to keep that level out of our work can be codified in our bylaws. And maybe it's not the 120% cap, but maybe it's some statement about that you live here, it's not a second home, it's not a business to make money to rent. I mean, we can have other language perhaps that would make that ceiling there to prevent somebody, they would have to then redo the bylaws if that's what they wanted to do in that framework, and that would be up to them. But to express our desires in a way in the bylaws without stepping on the people that are above 120 that aren't, they're not second home owners and they're not, short-term, they're not investing in a place just to make money on short-term rentals. So, which, I mean, that's a can of worms itself, but anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, I think to avoid the can of worms, because we're going to accidentally step into it if we're not careful. So using objective language and something to the effect of addressing the greatest need as identified by an economic analysis, something that doesn't call out if you're a second homeowner, if you're a bad person.
Right.
And we're going to codify that in our board orders. So that that we think that you're, let's not go there, okay? And I know that's not what we mean, I know, but what's unfortunate from the outreach subcommittee, the perception, if that's what people read or hear, becomes you don't like people who work for a living or whatever it is, and we just don't need to walk into those landmines when it's not what we mean or what we're here to do. So I just recommend objective language, objective criteria, whether it's the grant criteria or the board order or bylaws. Be very intentional about just being very objective and transparent about.
So our finance grant has a lot of objective measurements. It also has a subjective portion to it. So, I mean, when are we going to share that with the rest of the commission?
So we'll be sharing that at the next meeting. The Finance Committee will be taking its first step to really dive in. They've taken the work that the working group had been doing over the past few years and have turned it into a program that we're going to start actually launching within the next few months. So you'll be hearing about this and seeing that information in May. I will say that there is objective criteria. We're currently looking at up to 120% and scoring projects based on the affordability, the density, per unit, how much money are they asking? We're looking at the pro forma, so we are looking at that. While that's intellectual property, we're not sharing that information with anybody else, but we want to make sure that people actually need the money that they are looking for. And to Chris's point, I want to thank you very much for mentioning that there's also a subjective component. The objective...
Qualitative, that's right.
Thank you.
That's right,
There is a qualitative component. In addition to the quantitative components, where we're going to be scoring and letting you all know what the Finance Committee found in looking at the details of a project and a developer, you all also have an opportunity to look at a number of areas of criteria that are qualitative in nature. You can't put numbers on them, but we can talk about them in terms of their value to us as a commission and our goals. So there is room beyond just the AMI.
Is what you're going to share a draft, or is that the final?
That will be a draft, and this commission will have an opportunity to comment and direct the Finance Committee should we make any changes moving forward.
Perfect. All right, I want to wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for the conversation. It's definitely a great time for us to revisit and look at an update and see what makes sense. And Sarah and I had some brief conversation about potentially working with either maybe Echo Northwest or FCS, who did our most recent housing study, to try to put some of that very specific stuff, Michelle, that you're mentioning together for us so that we have that to look at. So that we are really looking at current situation each year. How is it changing? How might that change our granting focus? How might that change our outreach focus? What's different? What's new? So that we can try to bring that as a resource for this group. So we'll talk, I'm sure, more about that in the next couple of meetings, along with talking about the grant framework. But I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate everyone's candor and the ability to kind of dig into this. So is there anything burning that somebody needs to say to close this piece of the conversation?
I think the study thing is really important that you said, and I wonder if that should actually be in the bylaws. That way that's attaching to some kind of action step to be able to evaluate. So every, whatever it is, every 2 years or something that every 2 years, some kind of study, I don't know all the terms, but will be done in order to address the greatest need or something like that. That way there's an action step instead of just a...
You could build it into the community health needs assessment that happens every 3 years too.
Yeah, it would just be good to attach it to something.
Yeah, because it's in the founding documents that you will create and maintain as a housing commission, but it doesn't say every year, please.
Or
So
whatever
that-
the
or
years are,
whatever,
whatever the
yeah.
appropriate.
Well, and this is just an interesting time. Wages
Yeah.
have changed so much in the last 2 years that the AMI is likely tailing behind. You know, it's a very interesting and dynamic time that we are living in for so many reasons.
I have one more quick comment. I think our bylaws can be broad, and then our policies might be more specific, you know, so that we don't have to change the bylaws every time we come up with something new. So keep that broader, and then maybe have the policies that are specific.
To that point, and thank you very much, the executive committee, one of the things that they'll be doing is drafting a policies and procedures document. Typically, those provide more granular detail beyond the bylaws, which really give us our overarching goals and objectives, mission, and vision. Policies and procedures are living documents that we can adjust. And there's also opportunities to make changes over time as the world changes.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Erin.
Public comment.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have our other items that were on the agenda for our next meeting. We have the legislative update was the large one, and legislative priorities, I think we'll have to do that next meeting, as well as the others. Public comments. People in the room here or people on the computer?
Yes, I have a comment to make.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate all the effort and work you're putting into this. I just wanted to talk about, echoing the sentiment of that gentleman who spoke, the contractor, and that is, what can we do to reduce the barriers to development? What can we do to make it easier to build? How can we add more units? And what I'm looking into is each city has a different rule regarding development. And it's wildly drastic from one town to another. For example, in Tillamook, you can add 4 units and pay $8,000. That's saying 4 units in Rockaway would be $41,000. And that's because they're charging per dwelling. And if we are going to move forward, I think we've got to think about, removing the barriers to development and how we can make it easier. I did speak to the city councilors and the city planning about this, and I'm also realizing that they need some guidance from you guys from Tillamook County. These are civilians that aren't necessarily educated in land use, and they might just be there for a year or two, and they're kind of looking to you to understand how to set their policies and how we can bring on more units. So as much as I appreciate everything you guys are doing, I'd like to see more effort put into how to make it more consistent across the board, and how we can add more units by setting some consistency in terms of development.
Great, thank you.
And Peter Starkey also has his hand up.
Peter?
Hi, everyone. Peter from CARE. Just wanted to add on to the discussion that you all were having, just to keep in mind from an equity and inclusion lens as well, that making this much of a drastic change, I just want to sort of call to the table here that we're talking about 120% and less AMI, and how many of us around this room exist in that lived experience and in that population. And making sure that we're getting that feedback and that information from the constituencies that we are talking about, but making sure that their voice is included. And then also the access and the accessibility of them to be able to engage in this conversation. AMI, 120%, that's expert language that we all know because of our privilege of education and being able to be with each other and learning that and asking those questions. So just wanted to bring that into frame as well, because I think it is a really big decision to be able to have, and it affects a population of people that might not be present around this table or have that access or that expert knowledge. So just wanted to put that out to consider as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Anybody in the room? Please, speak up.
I can go first.
Thank you, Dad.
I really appreciate all of the information I'm gleaning here. And I do remember a lot of being one of those founding members and how, we developed that. As a result of what I learned here, I was put on the housing committee in the legislature and look at things on a little higher level. And right now, Speaker Grayfield has appointed me to a task force on equity in housing. And so we'll be learning a lot on a higher level. I do agree that we need to have construction standards throughout the county that are all the same. I know when I was the mayor of the city, we worked on our making our systems development charges so that they, could be more attainable. And I think that that is something that really needs to be addressed. So thank you for letting me be here today. And if I have any astounding information bits on equity and housing within the next week, I will get to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'd just like to put in my voice as a renter and someone who is low income. I've also done a lot of houseless outreach back when I lived in Montana. And I just would like to remind everyone that every single person in here is one bad day away from being houseless. There are children in Tillamook County that don't have a place to live. I think it's really important to focus on these vulnerable populations, and I can tell you, as someone with a bachelor's degree and an experience being a general manager of a radio station, I was hired at multiple places for less than $15 an hour due to my lack of experience. And even with the gracious AmeriCorps living stipends that I receive, I can't afford to live here. I'm lucky because I have family that I can stay with, but there are so many people, like we've mentioned, that need to work here but can't afford to live here. So I would just like to put emphasis on that particular group of people.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have lots to say, as many of you know, but I'll keep it as short as I can. I just want one thing I didn't hear talk much about is you've talked a lot about your income levels and units, and I want to caution the group to be very careful on what units you put a limit on up here or down here, because available land is where I'm struggling with the guys that I've been working with. Available land is the only barrier that I have run into. It is not penciling, it is not taxes, it is not SDCs even. If I had 4 acres of developable land, which we thought we did until we ran into a sewer issue at the city of Tillamook, if I had acres of land, we'd have apartments. We started years ago. We'd have hundreds, frankly, because the guys that I've been working with need to build a minimum of 40 units to even make it pencil to get their superintendent crews over here. We don't have land, so we're sitting here talking about all these grant opportunities and all these things, but like, really what Nathan was talking about has been our biggest barrier. And I don't want to see, my struggle is we have, Holden Creek and Greenlight coming in, and those are needed, but there's only so much available land. And if the feeling that I have got from this commission, because of the numbers that are being put out, and the focus has really been that there's not a whole lot of support for just the general developer who can come in and build apartments or units. It is only for the people who want government assistance or need grants. And so if we fill up our available lands with low-income apartments only, and that is what this group wants to focus on, then one of the problems is that we're essentially going to keep, I've had this conversation with Peter, are we going to keep our community in poverty? I know a handful of people at Holden Creek that literally have jobs that they have passed up thousands of dollars of bonuses at or commissions at because they cannot receive those. It will put them over the income. Now maybe it's only 10%. It's only a handful actually, so it's 5 out of 60 units. So, but are we keeping people back? Are we using our available lands to house only those who can't find the housing at the low income? Because there's a lot of people, as Michelle was saying, who cannot find housing at a higher level. And I think if you want to take a look at it, there's also a lot of people, while there's people living in housing that is too unaffordable for them, I guess you could say, there's also a lot of people living in housing that to them is subpar. They're living there because it's the only thing available, but yet they could afford a lot more. There's just nothing for them to buy or rent. So I think you have to, I just want to encourage everybody to take a look at the whole scope of things. You have to help the Elizabeths, but you also have to help the hospital employees, the New Year Space employees. And I really appreciate what Chris was saying about just taking a look at that whole picture, so. There.
How
about the Pelican? I know we're over time, but I just want to put this in. What are some short-term solutions that you guys have talked about? I know there's been the push for people to kind of open one room in their house and offer employees or people who want to move to the area to live in-home with them. I was just curious if you looked into other options. For Pelican at least, just really briefly, we sublease homes from homeowners. So we create leases with them, and then we have 6-month maximum leases that we set up with our employees so that they can move here and then potentially find something. But 6 months is not always reasonable depending on the timing or their income. So I was just curious if you guys have any short-term solutions that you're looking into, because I know that building can take an awful long time, especially the planning portion. So I was just curious what other things you've discussed, or if that's even been something that you're looking into, because I know there's lots of aspects and things that you've been working on. So also thank you for having me. It's been really eye-opening to kind of see the things you guys are working on, and it's refreshing for somebody who lives in town to kind of understand what's in progress and what things are being done. So.
Maybe TJ could mention, without specifics, but you know, the staff has been talking to quite a few different developers about potential projects.
We have. We've talked to a number of developers across AMI ranges, by the way. We've had conversations around how we can unlock land through the Development Code Committee. Those are long conversations. I'm happy to tell you all and remind you that we did include in our Goal 10 element, for the first time in 40 years, the housing needs analysis. And that from which we can actually work with the Development Code Committee to actually develop ideas that unlock those lands. Other things we're doing, we've submitted a grant for brownfield redevelopment. This is the specific topic that I come to this county with an area of focus on. My entire dissertation is written on interim housing solutions for vacant and underdeveloped and underutilized land. Those are all things that we can look at in the future. Are there immediate solutions that we have in the pocket right now? No. And communities all over the country are trying to find those. We can have those conversations though. And the fact that we're even having this conversation today demonstrates that we have what it takes to actually move forward solutions that are not only long-term and in the intermediate term, but also in the short term. I wish I had a solid answer for you right now, because I know that people are feeling this. I didn't have a place to live for the first 6 weeks that I was working remotely, and I'm just very lucky to find what I did. And so the answer is we are working on it, and we encourage the public and all of our committees to work together to figure out solutions.
I think part of the work that the outreach committee is doing too is to have the public understand the importance of this and less resistance to reasonable projects.
It's interesting to hear you ask that question about kind of, because we used to talk a lot about the low-hanging fruit, and it's like coming back now. And now I'm thinking about the fact that we've almost, not that we're moving on from the low-hanging fruit, but that we have a bigger vision where it's like now we're actually in a place where, you know, this, I mean, it's pretty cool to reflect back, but like we're moving on from low-hanging fruit to what are some of these bigger systemic, you know, things that we can work on.
I might add that the issues that you are talking about right now are being talked about up and down the coast. The land issues, the construction issues, the equity, the AMI, all of those things are being shared up and down the coast.
And I would just say, I do think there is low-hanging fruit that we really do need to prioritize, and it centers around ADU construction and development. You can take a portion of an existing home and do very minor construction, renovation, and have a separate unit for somebody. And that could be fairly short-term, but that would require several things that we need to get moving. There's the ordinance and the education and removing bottlenecks in the planning department so that these, you know, these not professional developers that are just homeowners can navigate the process. We almost need like a support staff function dedicated to it if we really want to see it move. But you could build 100 units very quickly in constructing or designating ADUs. And I think that that's an area that I would really like to see us focusing on. And it could involve the money from the finance or not.
Sarah, do you want to respond
Yeah,
to that? Because it is,
Sure.
I believe, in the code committee work and it's set to come before the commissioners.
So, yes, and then Miss does have her hand up again. So the draft is pretty much done. I've already received authorization from the commissioners to initiate the legislative text amendment process, wrapping up a large long-range hazard planning update process right now. So that will be rolling out and going to CACs probably within the next 2 months. And then we'll start those legislative hearings this summer.
And just a point of clarification, there's no requirement, is there a requirement on what those homeowners or landowners or landlords would be required to charge for rent for those units?
There's not, but there will be, I don't want to dive into this deep. We can talk about this maybe next month. The biggest barrier to an ADU are system development charges often because cities will still charge the full hookup fee. I think Tillamook is different.
Tillamook is different.
Right,
Tillamook has zoned for ADUs.
Right.
They have also taken into consideration systems development charges for ADUs, depending upon the size. So
Right.
they have been moving forward in the last several years to be able to accomplish this.
Thank you, Representative Weber. But for this ADU ordinance will only be for unincorporated communities who have districts that control their SDCs. They're all special districts. It won't be perfect, but we're taking, when you talked about the housing summit, this is that last third piece, which we are so excited. So we can talk more about it offline for sure. But it's coming. It's coming near you this summer.
Just to mention, I'll get back to this, but one of the things is our relationship with the cities is very important. A lot of the development is going to be in cities, not in unincorporated. And some of the work we're doing on ordinances become hopefully model ordinances that some of the cities will look at and say, yeah, that does make sense. So that's part of the dialogue that we have.
Absolutely.
Ms., you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that early on in this work, I was very strongly the champion of the low-hanging fruit, and it is not, other things kind of took place as priority. However, work and research has continued in the background, and it will be coming back to the table because a lot of these longer-term projects are wonderful and very important, but we have immediate need in our community for housing. So there are some things that are being discussed and worked on in the background, and hopefully by the next meeting, we'll be able to have an update.
Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for being too late. Hopefully people aren't missing appointments or other important things. But this has been a great meeting. I appreciate everybody's dialogue on it.
Thanks.
We aren't going to do the picture, are we?
We have to do the picture. I did my hair.
I was thinking it looked really pretty today.
That's up to you guys. We are missing Miss and Tim.
Are we ever all gonna be together?
That's something for you all to decide.
I wondered if we could get them on the.
That's what I was just gonna say, maybe we could do the two squares and.
It's not a bad
Oh, or
idea.
you can just edit the photo.
I don't have those skills.
Somebody does.
No, but we're
I'm
always gonna
happy
be
to
missing
appear as
somebody.
not pictured.
That's awesome.
Well, did you bring a camera? Who's that?
Hello.
Oh.
I have a tripod as well in my
good.
car.
Yeah.
And a watch that can take it.
Yeah, about 30 cameras in the room right now, I would guess.
But we should do it outside just because it's nice outside. Is my
Better
thought.
light.
This is our only picture. We don't have anything yet.
We do need an
It's
updated
exciting.
picture at the very least.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
Sarah Bobian is still in it.
Yeah.
So.
So I'm happy to organize it.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah,
Let
let's-
everybody else get away.
Thank you, Miss.
All right.
Thank you, online people.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the reminder about politics. I said the S word. Tonight. Call me out, please. Because there is a difference. Yes.
So we do it outside, TJ?
Yes.
Yeah, I
like
think that sounds great.
I like
I kind of agree, I think that's smarter.
It's gonna be great. I'll have,
That's your social science. Background.
Oh, good idea. So what's your we're influencing legislature. We don't build housing, developers will say, we try to make this kind of, you know.
I mean, they set their own priorities, right?
Yeah.
So, and I know DLCD is working on that now.
What do you think is eventually going to happen?
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't, we're watching, one like before this, it's actually is, to go forward with the assumption that we'll have seniors come along the future. And I started, right, you know John, right? Right. So John.
That's right.
sent out an email blast.
That's right, and they're all two acre pieces, like they would all qualify if the road
Why is it
the way.
Right. So it's still,
It's still cooking. It's still active. The good news is that once the legislature finishes that part of the process, we can do
so I'm just pushing it out, and also to the materials.
We've gone after,
I don't think so. Like frontier, and I will have to roll the dice on that, just to get it in our code.
Yeah.
hard to get a hold of, we've done baskets of that.
There's whatever, I still have to go through the hearing process, and it'll probably take a little hearing to go through the commissioners and the decision makers. But as soon as I know that's what it No, oh goodness, no. Why? Not my show tomorrow. Not my show. You guys are on your own. I'm gonna stay here and
Well, I'm really grateful.
maybe chat with Mayor Weber or Representative Weber, but, you know, before she leaves. I get a little bit of her time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guess I'll grab my stuff and get in the car first.
Oh, there you go.
Really happy to be able to do that.
Good to see you both.
Good to see you too.
Hope you're doing good. You too. You weren't the only one.
Sarah, we need to make cake one of these days.
You know what? I was just talking. Who was I talking?
Katie and Jordan Peterson came over to my house the other night. I haven't seen them in forever.
You coming?
No, I'm gonna clean it. No, I'm not in the picture. Go, have fun. I won't fight you. I started going back to school, so I got to PSU. I took 9 credits last term. And then I passed my certification as the board and the building official. Nobody knows that. I started on my own and then we did the test and I passed.
Well, of course you would.
It killed me. So all I did was go from work to study. But just trying to, life has changed. Yes.
But Katie and Jordan are good.
Yes,
I have received them.
Yes, okay, so we were talking about you, literally this Sunday, about one, how amazing you are, but two, we were talking about how great it would be to like do some cake work with you. I bought $300 worth of shit. And in December, Nicole came over and we tried to do cake, and Suzanne, I just wanted to cry. Like, I'm so mad. And I'm not doing it to like get the blue ribbon, but I am, oh my gosh, I'm so terrible.
We'll do it.
Okay, you wanna come over to my house, or you want me to?
Sure, or you can come over to my house.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. You'll do it. You'll see.
Okay, I'll text you, maybe, yeah, I need something. Good, I'd love to do it to you. It's so good to see you.
I love to see you.
Take care. You too.
Oh, we didn't see Tom today.